Here's to Crime Time with Piyush Jha, film director, ad filmmaker, and the author of Mumbaistan and Compass Box Killer. While his novels explore the gritty noir landscape of crime fiction in Mumbai, Piyush's films Chalo America, King of Bollywood, and Sikandar are noted for the unconventionality of their subject matter and for their relevance to contemporary society. Ravi Subramanian is the author of 5 best-selling books, including the latest, Bankrupt. An alumnus of IIM Bangalore, he has spent 2 decades in the banking sector. It is but natural that his stories are set against the backdrop of the financial services industry. In 2008, his debut novel, If God Was a Banker, won the Golden Quill Reader's Choice Award. The Incredible Banker won him the Economist Crossword Book Award in 2012. Somnath Batabyal worked for a decade in journalism, covering crime and criminality, hobnobbing with politicians and policemen, before entering the quieter world of Western academia. His first book, Making News in India, Star News and Star Ananda, was published in 2011. He has also edited a volume, Indian Mass Media and the Politics of Change. Somnath has recently published his first novel, a crime thriller, The Price You Pay. Stephen Alter has published 16 books of fiction and non-fiction. He was born in Mussoorie, India, where he currently lives and writes. For 10 years, he taught creative writing at MIT, and before that, he was director of the writing program at the American University in Cairo. He has received numerous honors for his writing, including fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the East-West Center in Hawaii, the Banff Center for Mountain Culture, and the Fulbright Program. The moderator for this session is Kishwar Desai, whose first novel, Witness the Night, won the Costa First Novel Award in 2010. It was also shortlisted for the Authors Club Award and longlisted for the Man Asian Literary Prize. Her third novel, The Sea of Innocence, has just been published in India and UK and will shortly release in Australia. Origins of Love, her second novel, was published to critical acclaim in UK, India, and Australia in 2012. She's an author and columnist who previously worked in television. Over to you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I want to especially thank the Hindu Lit for Life Festival for getting so many crime writers together on the same stage. As you can see, crime pays. But what I want to say today is that it's a fascinating time for all of us to examine what is happening to crime writing in India. There has been an explosion. And we are all here to discuss that what kind of an explosion is this? I mean, how did it all happen? And why is India suddenly so ready, or why are readers so suddenly ready, and publishers are ready to publish crime fiction? It wasn't the kind of genre that people looked at very seriously before. So that will be the first question that we put before you, and some of the answers will come on from the stage from my co-panelists and authors. What I want to say is one of the reasons could be that India is now a country where justice has suddenly begun to mean something. That this country is looking quite hopefully at people who are becoming more and more accountable for their actions. In the past, especially in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of Indian cinema which kind of reflected the reality we lived in. If something terrible happened to you, if you were raped or somebody in your family was murdered or there was some financial scam, you had 2 ways to deal with it. You could either just go out there and shoot that guy or whoever it was who had done this, or you could just sink into hopelessness. Perhaps there is a third way of dealing with it. Now you can write a crime novel about it. But in Indian cinema, what used to happen in the 60s and 70s was the angry young man came onto the stage. He was the guy who came center stage because we could not deal with the crimes that were happening around us then. So the whole issue of accountability wasn't there. And that meant that the storyline was pretty simple. There was a crime that happened, the guy would get up and go out there, kill the person, and that was justice for you. Crime writers, on the other hand, in today's world, are looking at a variety of social issues. We are dealing with different kinds of writing. Within the genre, there are very many more subgenres, which we're all exploring, all of us. And looking at this fantastic change that is coming into India, where that sense of accountability that I spoke about is very much present in all our books and all that we are writing about today. So whereas in cinema we had The Angry Young Man, now you are seeing films like Kahani, I don't know what Bobby Jasus is going to be like, but definitely Kesh Bakshi is coming back onto the television screens, and the whole detective genre, the whole system of crime writing where the good guys actually do in one shape or form win at the end, but not necessarily in a violent way. There is a cleverness to the plot. There are certain techniques through which they find out certain forensic steps which are taken to actually investigate what has happened. So I think these are very important changes in this genre of writing, which is kind of reflective of the changes that society is going through. So basically, I think that's where we are today, and perhaps that's why there has been an explosion in this kind of writing. So that was my way of looking at it, but now I would like to open up this platform to my co-panelists, and I'll start with Piyush, who is also a film writer and a director. Why do you think, Piyush, we're suddenly seeing such an explosion?
Kishwar, the thing is that there was crime writing in India and existed in the regional languages, and even kind of was really big in Bengali, like you mentioned, Byomkesh Bakshi and Feluda, and Malayalam and Tamil and Marathi. Even every regional area had one, except in English. And today, what we are seeing, what you're saying, talking about, is English crime writing is coming around, because I think there was this whole generation which was grew up on foreign crime fiction. We read the Jeffrey Archers, we read the Frederick Fawcett's, or the James Hadley Chases and the Agatha Christie, and now we have come into our own as writers. I think the first time people were writing, there was this first wave and the second wave of writing, which was more literary, and now we are going to the genres. So the genre of crime fiction is something which I think people who have been bred on that are taking to. In my own case, for example, I love crime fiction. I grew up reading crime fiction, Hindi crime fiction, which my mother used to read when I was a kid, and then other crime fiction, and it just came to me naturally. So I think when I decided to write, I decided to take crime fiction, and I think that, I felt that when I start writing it, maybe there'll be other people, and within the past 1-2 years that I've written my 2 books, I found that there's so many others. So it's a happy coincidence. I think it's an idea whose time has come.
Ravi, what about you?
Kishwar, I think there are, what you said about the societal changes, the things which are going on in the environment today, whether they are actually giving rise to a new breed of crime thrillers in this country. I don't think that's the case, because if such were the case, you would probably have a lot of political thrillers coming out, because you would want
they're being written right now.
You would want politicians to be killed. You would probably want all kinds of cricket and IPL thrillers coming out, all kinds of rape thrillers coming out. The fundamental reason why a crime thriller exists is to entertain. Let's not miss that point. I think people need to be entertained. People want to read good English crime thrillers. People now are willing to go out and buy those books from the stores. And that's the reason why people are exploring new genres. And I think that's where crime thriller is one of the segments which is actually coming up. Unlike your romantic books, which find popularity with a fair bit of youngsters and which sell in hordes, the 100 rupee, 150 books, crime thrillers are slightly more evolved in English. And that's the reason why probably you don't see the offtake of crime thrillers being extremely high, Okay, so crime thrillers don't end up selling, 500,000 copies or 250,000 copies or thereabouts. They sell in a much subdued number. The market is smaller than most of the other markets for crime thrillers. But having said that, I think evolution of new Indian writers who actually are more willing to write in this space, either through their own experiences or through what they see and read and through research, I think that's giving this a fresh breath of air. So it's kind of rejuvenating this entire segment in English. In Tamil, for example, we always had Sujata's crime novels. In English also, we had Shakuntala Devi's The Perfect Murder, one of the best crime thrillers that I've ever read. In Hindi, you had Surendra Mohan Pathak's, I don't know how many novels he wrote, but probably if someone were to look at the number of copies that he has sold, he would probably outsell any other author in this particular country, but he wrote in Hindi. So we always had crime thrillers, but in this space, in the English crime thriller space, in a slightly more evolved space, we are seeing a few new people coming in, and that's the reason why good books are coming out, people are liking it, people are reading more of it, those books are becoming successful, people see the success of those books and get inspired to write, so new authors are coming in. So it's a bit of a vicious circle. I think that's the change which is happening in this country.
So very rightly put, from a guy who also looks at financial scams and all that in his book, he's saying it's the money, it's the commerce, it's suddenly successful because there is money to be made from this kind of writing, but we can come back to that later. So can I move on to you? Yes.
I don't know if I can add to after three of you, which have given pretty detailed answers. But one of the things I would think of is that the reason why it has taken, why we are writing now, and there's a splurge of crime fiction in the last year, is perhaps because it's just the English writing industry in India is a very new industry, and it has evolved now. And because there's so many of us writing, we need to put ourselves in genres and boxes to sell. So, and I say this specifically because when I started writing The Price You Pay, I didn't know it to be a crime thriller. I was writing about the criminal world and one particular crime, but there's no whodunit. But the moment my publishers and agents heard this, they said, okay, this is a crime thriller. So I learned that I was writing a crime thriller. All of us are writing though we are writing thrillers, I think we're writing in different kind of stories. Piyush, as he says, he writes the classic noir crime. He's writing on financial scams. I'm writing about a crime reporter. So all of us are writing different kind of books, which, because perhaps the industry has matured and there's so many books, we need to identify ourselves. The publishers need to identify us, and the buyers and the readers. So perhaps we're being put in slots. Earlier, it was not so necessary. Maybe that could be the answer.
Right. Stephen, what about you? You've come into it from a different aspect altogether, because you used to do children's books and other kinds of literature earlier.
Right. I mean, many of my books wouldn't qualify as thrillers. They may be sleepers more than thrillers, put people to sleep. But I think that, as Somnath was saying, there's the publishing industry in India, I think, has grown and matured and come to that point where it isn't just Indian fiction and one bookcase in a bookstore. You're now seeing that bookcase being divided up into different genres. You're seeing some authors being placed on different shelves. And I think all of us as writers resist the idea of being boxed into one particular category. Nevertheless, I think that the idea of writing something that's a thriller and a mystery is, for a writer, certainly for me, was a very exciting challenge, because the minute you put that label on your book, it means that you've got to keep your reader fully awake. And they've got to, a page turner is a page turner. And that wonderful, completely nonsensical term, unputdownable, which I love it when people say that about my own books, but I have no idea what they're talking about. Nevertheless, I think we, as writers, want to be read by as wide an audience as possible. And for me, writing a thriller was an opportunity to find a whole nother readership, which I think is very rewarding. Because when you find people who are reading you, not because they want to read a travel book or a novel about a love affair gone bad, but they're reading it because they really want to be excited at every page. I think that's what, for a writer, and if you can deliver that, that's what's particularly rewarding.
Well, I think a couple of very important points have come up during this discussion, but one of them, which I think irks all of us sitting on this stage, is that sometimes we feel we do not get the same amount of respect as, because I'm also a writer of crime fiction, come into it very accidentally as well. I didn't know I'd written a crime novel. And the second one, which I wrote, which was part of the series, I mean, the first reaction one of the readers had at first was, there are not enough dead bodies in this, you know. Are you sure this is crime fiction? So I think there are certain traditions of writing crime fiction which need to be adhered to, which we will also discuss as we go along. But I think more importantly, the fact that we are not treated as the normal literary authors because we are considered commercial authors. You know, we write for the popular taste. And sometimes that's not very pleasing for either publishers or for people who give awards, you know, because we somehow come at the bottom of the category. So I just want to ask all of them in turn how they deal with this and whether it's actually okay. Because if your books are doing well, how does it matter if you don't get the awards? Okay, Piyush.
Kishwar, whenever I feel a little, I feel that people, from the literary field, etc., are not giving me respect. I walk into a bookshop and I get respect out there because I sell. So the guy who sells my books out there sits up and says, "Welcome, sir," because he knows that I sell. So he gives me respect. That's fine.
But I think what we also need to discuss is how tightly plotted these books are. People seem to think these books are easy to write. They are not. In fact, they're much more difficult to write than literary fiction. Would you like to comment on that?
I don't think it's an issue of literary and non-literary, because a thriller is a thriller. How many of you here read thrillers? Just put your hand up. How many of you really bother whether it's a literary thriller or a commercial thriller? One or two. Okay. That explains. A thriller is meant to thrill. A thriller is meant to give you excitement. A thriller is meant to be unputdownable. Okay, and as long as in your book you deliver that, the question of literary and commercial does not arise. If you go back and ask how many of these thrillers are literary thrillers which you actually get in the market, hardly any. You really can't classify a thriller in that sense. So the question of respect and thriller, commercial, literary, to my mind, does not arise. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, I think there are some fundamental rules of writing a thriller, okay, which I follow. One, make sure that there is a murder in the first 5 pages of the book.
It's very important, the dead bodies.
Because the moment there is a murder in the first 5 pages of a book, the reader is hooked. Two, make sure there is a twist in the last 3 pages of the book. Because if there is a twist in the last 3 pages of the book stays with the reader for long. The book stays with the reader for long, the reader talks about it a lot more. And then there is word of mouth. So it's like somebody just taking a knife, a dagger, and just thrusting it through your heart. And then when you thought that everything is over and done, comes the final twist. And then you say, ouch. And then you pull it out. That's the way to write a crime thriller. Apart from that, just keep your story short, keep your chapters short, keep small sentences, and at the end of every chapter, you have a hook where the reader actually goes on to the next chapter. I think, as somebody once said, and it's a very, very, something which stayed with me forever, is that most of the books get read at night, okay, and when people are about to go to sleep. So when you're going to sleep, the battle between your drooping eyelids and tired fingers has to be won by the tired fingers. And if you manage to do that, you've written a fabulous thriller. I think, to my mind, that's what works.
Right. Somnath, Stephen, yeah, please go ahead.
I was just going to, I won't take issue with Ravi, but I do think that certainly if you have a murder in the first 5 pages, people will keep reading, maybe for the next 10 pages, but whatever it may be. But I think what is absolutely crucial for a thriller, no matter how plot-driven it is that the characters must be absolutely convincing and believable. And we were talking actually before this session about why is it that so many thrillers have a character who is repeated again and again in a sequence novels. And part of that is because I think we, as writers, invest a great deal in that particular character. We create them, we make them different, we make them interesting. And you could even have a thriller without a murder. You could have a thriller without an obvious crime. But at the end of the day, what I find in most thrillers that I enjoy, John le Carré, Graham Greene books, so many writers, it's identity at the end of the day that is driving you. Who is this person? And as a writer, you trip your readers up. You don't tell them everything about that particular character. And then the reader is constantly trying to figure out, is this guy good or is he a bad guy? Or which part of him is good and which part of him is bad. And I think that, in more cases than even the dead bodies, is what drives the reader to the end of the story.
Somnath, would you have a comment?
I would actually agree with you a bit, Kishwar. I definitely had literary pretensions before I wrote this book. And when I started thinking about it and writing it, and I was told it's going to be marketed as a crime thriller, I was quite aghast. Like, me, write a crime thriller? I was
You were aghast, not just... Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, what, really? And of course, 6 months later, with this second edition out, I'm very happy that it has been marketed as a crime thriller. But I cannot completely agree with you, Ravi, that it has to have a murder in the first 5 pages. In fact, my book doesn't have a murder at all. But it still does sell. And I agree with you that we kind of try and create believable characters. There's obviously, because it's a crime thriller, there's a crime. But murder is not the only crime. And you know it very well. So how, perhaps to keep attention, and every writer comes to it in a different way, makes for a thriller. There definitely has to be a twist at the end. But to come back to your question, yes, I did feel the pinch of being told that you're writing a crime thriller, not a literary novel. I did have literary pretensions, but delighted to be a crime writer now.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, okay.
Why did the fact that you were called a crime thriller, your book was called a crime thriller, why did that disappoint you?
It didn't. As I said, I had literary pretensions. Having been a
so why can't crime thriller be a literary book?
Coming to it. So as a literature student in Delhi University, and you were out to write the great Indian novel. You'll be the person who will write the big novel, right? So that's where the story starts. And then to be explained, yes, a Le Carré writing or Graham Greene writing, and that and when I met one of the greatest of agents in England, Mr. Strauss.
Can you hold the mic?
Yeah, one of the big agents, Mr. Strauss, and he talked about, look at Crime and Punishment, look at Dostoevsky's writing, look at psychological thrillers, and you have to convince yourself that yes. So I definitely started from that range and understood that a good crime thriller, as all of you know, is a great social critique. A good crime thriller will be able to aptly talk about the current situation, places, what's happening around you. A thriller does that. It reflects society. And that's what makes a great novel.
Yeah, actually, I would like Kishwar to talk to us about her books, because they are very socially relevant. So, Kishwar, would you like to say why did you choose that? Like your books are called social crime thrillers, aren't they?
Social critiques.
Social thrill. Yeah. So why are they called that? I mean,
well, I think a bit like Somnath, I was very taken aback when I was told that I'd written crime fiction. Quite, as I said, accidentally, I had put at the heart of my novel a social worker who's an amateur detective, and she goes to a small town in Punjab and to solve what she thinks is just a normal crime, but it involves a very young girl. And as she goes through it, she realizes that there are issues of female feticide and infanticide and so on. And people actually liked my central character of Simran Singh, who is this very unconventional, stroppy Punjabi woman who goes out there, does what she wants, drinks, smokes, has lots of boyfriends, etc. And then suddenly everybody turned around and said, you've got you've got a great character there. Why doesn't she come back? And this is actually a crime novel because, quite to my surprise, it ticked off all the boxes that he's just said. It had many murders in the first 5 pages itself. So, I had no idea that I'd written a crime thriller, but in my case, it was because people liked the central character, not only in India, but all over the world, wherever my book has been published. People have written back to me and said how much they liked Simran Singh and they would love to see her come back in a new novel, and that's how I wrote the second one and then the third one. But I just want to come back to the central point that when people talk about the literary novel, I also had this slight disdain for writing crime fiction because I didn't really think it was that up on the literary ladder, as it were. But when you start writing it, you realize how difficult it really is, how carefully you have to plot it, and how every last bit of the jigsaw has to fit in. Otherwise, your readers are going to write back to you and say, why did that happen on page X? It doesn't fit in. That doesn't happen in a literary novel. You never get that kind of real engagement. When people read your books, they really read them because they're like totally involved. So I think it's the plot which also very often drives the book. But I think a lot of us have grown up with the Agatha Christie mold where there are characters who come back over and over again, Miss Marple, Hercule Poirot. So how important is the central character to the book? Piyush, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so like you said, you have your character who's coming in books and books. I didn't have any literary pretensions. I knew that I was writing crime fiction, and that's because I know crime fiction like the back of my hand. I've been reading it since I was a kid, as I mentioned. And I know for a fact that crime fiction has a character who keeps coming back and again and again. And if the character is good and the people relate to that character, they enjoy those stories. For instance, Sherlock Holmes, Byomkesh Bakshi, Feluda, you name them. Every good crime fiction writer develops a good character, and if people like that character, they enjoy the stories of the character. So I have developed my character, which is Inspector Virkar, and now in my third book of Inspector Virkar, and he keeps coming back and solving a newer and newer case in Mumbai, and that's where he's based. And I get people asking me, oh, so what is Virkar's new case going to be, and how is he going to tackle that? And they talk about his quirks. I mean, he drinks a certain kind of beer, and he writes a bullet and has a certain attitude. He's English speaking, guy from Maharashtra. He's grown up. He's a Kohli fisherman's son. So all those things add to the mystique around that character and make him very interesting, and people keep asking for backs. So I have about 3 or 4 more books planned now already.
Ravi, how important is a character like that to you?
Okay, before I get into that point, I just had a comment on the 5 panelists here. If tomorrow this session is covered in the newspaper, it will actually be called The Reluctant Crime Writer. Because out of the 5 panelists here, there are 2 who don't seem to be wanting to call themselves crime thriller writers.
No, now we are. I mean, as you said, we got totally converted.
By accident.
Once we realized we were doing crime fiction, we just sold
I'm the only one here, I want to be a crime writer.
Okay, that apart. Kishwar, my writing style is very
I'm writing my 4th book right now. Crime thriller.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Okay, so now we can call you a full-fledged crime thriller writer. Okay, the way I write is very different from the way many people write. Okay, I don't plot my story on an Excel worksheet or a storyboard. I start with a canvas. I start with a backdrop. This is what I'm going to write about, and then I start writing. The first chapter leads to the second leads to the third. When I write like that,
it's all intuitive. It's all an intuitive flow.
It's all intuitive. Okay, and when I write like that, it's very difficult for me to actually develop a plot, develop a character who I carry forward in every single book. 2, people in my book who actually solve cases and lend the thrill element to the book are very, very ordinary human beings. They are not superhumans. They are not people who can shoot from 500 feet and get the target. They are pretty much people like all of us who go and solve, probably motivated by certain turn of situations, certain turn of events, go and solve a particular issue. Okay, and that lends to the thrill in the book. So for me, given that there is no superhuman, there is no fabulous forensic expert, it's a regular banker or person like you and me, I don't think I can create those kind of characters that carry forward in every book. And two, I spend that time and effort in every book to try and create a character, give the reader a completely different story. Normally, when I develop a plot, develop an individual character, chances are you would actually fall into a rut and repeat the same thing, because a guy can only do so much, so he has only certain skill sets. So when you develop a character who actually runs across all your books, chances are you'll repeat yourself. So I don't want to fall into that rut.
We could argue forever on that, because we have, apart from the books we are writing, there's also the Agatha Christie mold and so on.
There's a lot of evidence.
Okay, so
the reason why.
So we won't get sidetracked.
One last point. Okay. The reason why
we don't get into a fight, you mean?
No.
The reason why people write about one character and take the same character across multiple books is very simple. If my first book doesn't sell, my second book doesn't sell, my third book doesn't sell, maybe my fourth book will sell with that character, and if the fourth book sells, all the other books will also sell because it's the same character.
I completely
That's
disagree.
the only reason
why
people write, and it's a lot more easier to
actually.
You don't need to invest time in building a new character.
That's completely wrong. I think that's completely wrong, but we can go back to that again.
Until that last
he's
comment.
Dying to say that.
Everything else was fine.
Somnath, would you like to
Until that last comment, I was going to say I'm very proud to be here on the stage.
Yeah, I don't think that's very true.
No, but I think that we should be writing crime thrillers, whatever kind of thrillers they are, with no apologies. Because there's absolutely no way that anyone can convince me that you can write a book without taking it seriously. Because it's a long process. It takes a year and a half to write this thing. You have to wake up every morning believing that it's worth something. And I think each of us does that in whatever way we may do. We may joke about it. I mean, when I met Ravi for the first time, I said, do you write hardcore crime or just, and he very proudly said hardcore. And I think that there's something about the way we define ourselves as writers that speaks to the sort of integrity of the process itself. And it's, as you said, Kishwar, it's no easier to write a crime novel than it is to write a literary novel or something that's there.
Absolutely.
Your first question was on characters. The reason I think every crime writer has his own
Could you hold the mic?
Yeah, sorry, I keep doing that. Okay, the reason that it's slightly different for every writer, and you're talking about a central character. I had 4 characters in the novel, and I didn't think anyone was more than the other. There were 2 reporters and 2 policemen. But how sometimes when you go to these literary festivals and you have these big authors, they tell you their characters ran away and did something. And I used to always wonder as a reader, that what do you mean your character ran away and did something? You are the writer. But while writing the novel, I realized that the one character whom I actually did not like in the beginning, the young crime reporter, had run away with the novel. When somebody pointed out what's going to happen to him next, as the person was reading, my agent, and he's so lovable. And I thought this was the bad guy. So I realized that he had actually managed to run away, and slowly, of course, became the central character. And you're right, Piyush, that's, now I'm being asked to bring Abhishek Datta back again. As, where does he go with his crime reporting next? So I'm sending him off to the boondocks in the Northeast.
No, I think I agree, because if a character is not loved, no matter how many books you write, you will not be able to create that bestseller. So I think
and you won't have a chance to survive to the 4th book.
Yeah, you won't. Your publisher will not pick it up. So the response has to come from the readers, from your publisher, from everybody to make that character survive.
And Ravi, there's one thing. Ravi and me have been on many panels, and he keeps saying, there's one thing. Your characters are superhuman. What do you mean? My character is a normal inspector. He's a normal human being. Her character is just a lady who's a social
Yes,
worker,
social worker.
These are normal human beings. They just rise to the occasion like any normal human being would be. Doing, we are pushed into a situation, we would rise and try to give justice. And that's all my character believes in,
Okay,
justice.
now that I have pushed
And he
the-
doesn't have any superhuman, he cannot shoot from 500
Ravi
feet.
is trying to start a fight. He wants a thrilling, thrilling experience. He wants
Thrilling
a bit
session.
of crime.
now that spurred the debate.
He wants us to kill him.
Among the panelists, I think Piyush, an inspector, is supposed to figure out who committed the murder. He's supposed to solve a crime.
Yeah, my
a
guy is
banker is not
confused many
supposed to solve
times.
a crime.
My guy is confused many times and then he finds his way somehow. He's a normal human being. He doesn't shoot from 500 feet.
So I'm going to stop this before there is a murder on stage and open this up to the audience. Are there any questions? Yes, please.
We love to read crime novels because of the person who solves the problem. Like Sherlock Holmes we love,
Exactly.
Feluda we love, Mr. Bomkesh Bakshi, we love them. Not because of the crime what Mr. Ravi is telling.
Oh, well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you.
You can add Inspector
Okay,
Virkar to that
It's
list.
been publicly
just
upgraded.
I have been told by a customer that that's not
Sorry?
great.
Okay. Can we have that lady up, please?
This is for Ravi. I'm midway through your book, If God Was a Banker. I have a banking experience myself in New York. My question to you is, I'm sure, in that book, there must be elements of what happened inside banks.
Lots of them.
In a fictionalized way. So when you were writing it, did you ever wonder whether you could be slapped up with a lawsuit?
Whether I could be?
Slapped up with a lawsuit for exposing things that, when you first
Sure.
join a bank, you have...
Okay.
Okay. I think he's
Okay,
got the point, yeah.
First and foremost, If God Was a Banker is not a crime thriller. Okay. Two, just to answer your question, how many of you have heard of this book called The Bikini Murders by Farooq Dhondi? Okay, most of you. So that's supposed to be a story of Charles Shobraj. Charles Shobraj never contested it. He never went and said, that's my story, how could you write my story without asking me? Simply because had he gone ahead and sued Farooq Dhondi on that, then it would be
Many more things would have
accepting the
come out.
fact that that story is his. So tell me, after having read half of If God Was a Banker, which banker would come ahead and say, that's my story? Not a single guy would be willing to stand up and say, it's my story, because it shows a particular character in extremely poor light. No bank would also want to say that they did ABC to a particular employee.
Okay, can we
That's
move-
point number one. And point number two is, after reading those books, many people have come and asked me, is it a Citibank story? Is it an ICICI bank story? Is it an ABN bank story? It simply shows the fact that while I have written about a particular instance in a particular bank, stories like those are pretty much there in every single bank around.
Okay, next question, please. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. My story is generally for all of you. One of the major challenges of crime writing is it tends to get a little monotonous, or the type of murder or the type of crime committed might tend to get a little monotonous. What is your suggestion, or what is the mantra that keeps crime writing going?
Stephen, do you want to start with that? She says, would it be a monotonous process for finding new subjects or new types of crime or whatever?
Well, I think there are so many different kinds of evil that we're never going to run out of possibilities on that. And I think that it's not so much the murder itself, it's the murderer or murderers that we're interested in. And those are, in many cases, deeply flawed characters. In some cases, they may have admirable traits to them. And I think that I've always found bad guys are much more interesting than good guys. Yes, we like to see somebody solve the crime and tie up all the loose ends at the end of it. But I find what's much more fascinating is that mind, that criminal mind, that dark side of the human personality, the human psyche, which is what actually drives someone to commit that murder. I think that can never become
I think
monotonous.
that's an excellent answer. So we'll just move on to the next question.
I'm an amateur writer myself, so just I want to know that how do you do your research, especially how the police works, that sort of research, because I couldn't find much of the material in libraries.
How do you
the
do
police works?
Yeah, that sort of
Can I
research.
answer
How do you
that?
do that?
Yeah, please.
Well, see, I went to a lot of policemen, right? I went from a police constable to the commissioner, and I understood how the police works on different levels, so that when I'm actually writing, I create a realistic scenario. And then I went to a police historian, and I had his point of view taken, that is this kind of a thing. So, and he said, well, in this case, it could have been possible like this, etc., and made sure that I didn't do anything wrong, just to understand how police works. Then I went and created my stories. So I had that at the back of my mind, but I had all the research at the back of my mind. So I don't go and ask for a specific thing, but now it's all there at the back of my mind.
Piyush, I must come in there to Piyush.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Piyush and I was on a literary panel in Pune, and I was asked the question about how do I do my research, and I had a long-winded answer. And Piyush then said, I don't do any research. I just write. So this is surprising. This is brilliant. So even then I thought that this can't be true.
No, this is the only research I did right in the beginning. And after that, I don't research my stories at all, because that's something which I create.
No, but I just want to add that, so there are different styles of writing crime fiction. Piyush prefers not to research, but the rest of us, certainly I do a lot of research. It takes me almost a year to put together the background to any story, because a lot of the times I'm going into areas that I don't know much about. For example, in my second novel, I wrote about the whole business of renting out wombs. I wrote about surrogacy and the whole mushrooming of fertility clinics and what's going on there, and the crime was set in one of those clinics. So I had to go out there, talk to doctors, talk to nurses, talk to people who are going in for that, because there is no other way of being able to create an authentic story. But there might be others on the panel who have different ways of functioning. Ravi?
We authors tend to overcomplicate a lot of things. Okay, I think that's, you should understand. 2, 80% of your research is today internet-based. You can read a lot of books on specific topics. For example, when I wrote Bankrupt, I had a story about gun control in the US. I read 3 books on gun control, okay, just to form an opinion on both positive and negative, and then formulate my own opinion on what I want to write in the book. So you can read books, you can Google the internet, you can read from reliable sources. Don't go to Wikipedia, but go to reliable sources, ask for some research documents, read. After that, if you still have to go out in the field, meet relevant people.
But you must feel confident before you start writing the book. Okay, right, I think, okay, one last question and then we'll wind up.
Me?
Yeah. Oh, it's here already. Sorry, that's the microphone.
My questions to all of you. As crime writers, do you believe a better novel is one where the author digs deep into the investigation, or one where the reader is kept in the dark on the investigation and the climax is, say, the highlight, where say, the killer is revealed?
The climax has to be the highlight, because you hold the guy's attention till then, and if he gets surprised then you've got a good story.
Okay, anybody wants to give a quick answer?
I told you the journey is important, and the climax, the twist has got to be dramatic. So, and panelists disagree, but murder in the first 5 pages.
No, I think the story has to,
page.
sorry, can I just add one thing? The story has to hold the reader's attention right to the last page.
Exactly.
I don't think you can allow the reader to just shut the book anywhere and say, it's okay, it doesn't matter.
That's what I meant by journey.
It has to matter. It has to make a difference to him whether he knows the whole plot or not.
There has to be a payoff at the end of it. And I think that when the character that Ravi murdered on page 5 comes back to life on page 325, then we're in business.
I find that of late I've been reading and even reviewing crime thrillers, and I find that one good quality that a crime thriller, as far as I understand now, is that the place seems to be important. The place should be a character. It's not always the case, but is it necessary for a place to be a character? Like in Somnath's book,
can I take
Delhi
this?
is a character.
Yeah.
Delhi is an important character. It's a social critique of Delhi.
I think you're right. For me, my love for Delhi and my disdain at the same time at how Delhi was turning out was very important. The setting. And that's why, in the earlier question when we mentioned that any good crime thriller, any book of any worth, the social setting is always very important. The characters come out of that social setting. And if the social setting is not well etched, at least for me, it's not worth the dog's breakfast. So yes, Delhi became, absolutely vital, and to research Delhi became absolutely vital.
But as we said, the taste of the pudding is in the eating, so please go out there and read our books. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.